This forgotten hero is an unlikely hero. He was hardly educated, he came from lowly stock, and he started his ministry when he was well on in years. Yet he shines like a burning light. His name, William Carvosso. Carvosso was born in 1750 in Marcel in the southwest of Cornwall. He was brought up by his Christian mother, and when he was 10, he became an apprentice at a farm. He attended church, but that didn't stop him getting involved in gambling, wrestling, and cockfighting. And his escapades nearly killed him because he was nearly drowned twice and he fell off his horse and was nearly killed. When he was 21, his sister, who had just come to the Lord, urged him to go to a Methodist meeting at Newlyn. As the evening came, he felt something compelling him to go. And when he arrived at the meeting, he felt something grip him, and he had an understanding of the enormity of his sins and how this affected God. And he promised from that moment to serve the Lord for the rest of his life. Carvosso immediately gave up his friends and set himself apart because he knew he had to have a personal relationship with Christ. Unfortunately, it was a struggle for him because he felt that Satan was walking at his side all the time. But during this struggle, he made a decision that whatever the cost, whatever the opposition, he was going to cry out to God for mercy. And as soon as he made this decision, he felt his sins had been forgiven, and the Spirit witnessed that he was a child of God. He was happy for 3 months, but then he began to understand the enormity of his sin, and he wanted to receive inner holiness. And the process that he went through at this time is something that we can all learn from. He read the Bible, and he understood from his reading that we get sanctified. Then he continued to read, and he understood that without holiness we don't see God. He struggled with unbelief instead of having faith in what was written in the Word. And 8 months later, he was at a prayer meeting and he decided to exercise this faith. And he cried out saying that, "I want the blessing now." And as soon as he said those words, he felt Holy Spirit come into the room, and he felt refining fire come through his heart, and he was sanctified. All his sin and self were gone, and he was filled with God. I believe that this was the baptism of fire he was experiencing, and it's something that we all need. When he was 38 years old, Carvosso came here to Ponsanooth, 25 miles away, to take on a farm. He also took on a Methodist home group, and he led that group for a number of years until God started to show him that people were dying without knowing Jesus. And God told him that he had to start evangelizing. Now, he was well into his 40s at this stage, which was, in those days, quite an age to take on such a responsibility. He began to pray for his children, and within 3 weeks, all 3 of them were saved. He went from house to house telling people about Jesus. As a result, his home group grew, and it became, from one small group, it became two large groups. And then they needed a church for them. So they built a church here in Pont-Saint-Neuf. And that church became too small, so they built a bigger one. And in fact, after his death, this present church was built, which is larger still. In 1814, there was a large revival. And in Carvosso's words, multitudes were saved. And at this point, the Lord told him to give up the farm and to be a full-time evangelist. So he began going around every single house in the district telling people about Jesus. At this time he was 65 years old, which is a significant age in those days to take on all the traveling and the preaching that this involved. And it was also the time that he began to teach himself how to write. And he started a journal, which is where all this information I'm telling you comes from. He went from house to house telling people about Jesus, and when prompted by Holy Spirit, he would stop people in the street and talk to them. He had a great love and compassion for the people. He wrote about one young woman who he would have died for had that helped her to be saved. Fortunately, that was not required, and what was required was 11 days of praying, and that's when she gave her life to Jesus, and she was followed by her sister and two brothers. The people really loved him, which is not really surprising, I suppose, because of the love he showed them and the way he served them. In 1823, there was another revival, and he spent days talking to people who had been convicted of sin and trying to lead them to Jesus. He wrote, "The more I meditate on divine things, the more my soul is lost in the immensity of redeeming love." William Carvosso died in 1834 of a bladder infection at the age of 84, and he's buried right here. He was a man full of love and passion for the people. And God was able to use him powerfully because Carvosso pursued holiness. There was more of God in him than there was of the world. Age is no barrier. Old or young, nothing can stop us serving God. And if we obey God, we can do mighty things in his name.